It is noon on Thursday. You're watching CBC News BC. Hello, I'm Dan Bird in our Vancouver newsroom. Time to get you up to date. We start with some developing news in Surrey. Homicide investigators have been called in after Mounties say officers found two men dead in a home in Newton last night. Police say they went to check on some people living near 151st Street and 61st Avenue just before 9:30 p.m. The RCMP says the two victims did know each other and they are not looking for any suspects. It's not clear how the men died. The mayor of the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality says he is relieved rain has finally been falling near Fort Nelson. This comes as fire crews work to contain the Parker Lake blaze. But Rob Fraser warns another fire, the Patry Creek wildfire north of Fort Nelson, is also a huge concern.
Yeah, the Wildfire Service says it's not a threat to us right now. It's burning up against a fairly large swamp, which is sort of holding it, and then the river is also holding it. So it's a concern. We're always looking over our left shoulder to see what's happening over there, but right now they're not saying there's any danger.
It's still not clear when the 4,700 or so people who fled can go home. Many of them have gone to Fort St. John and Prince George. A warning for you, this next story contains disturbing details. In Port Alberni, the sentencing hearing has begun for a couple responsible for killing a 6-year-old Indigenous boy. Dante Lucas was killed in 2018. It happened 4 months after he was removed from foster care and placed with his birth mother, Raquel Charlson, and stepfather, Mitchell Frank. Charlson and Frank were charged with first-degree murder in 2022. Last year, they pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter. The Crown and defense are recommending they be sentenced to 15 years in prison, minus time already served. An agreed statement of fact read out in court describes some unspeakable abuse the boy suffered in their care, including being forced to hang by his knees from the top of a door until he fell. An autopsy determined the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the brain. Questions remain about why the child welfare agency responsible for Dante did not step in when signs of abuse became apparent. A group called Justice for Dante is demanding a public inquiry. It held a rally outside the courthouse earlier today. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre claims British Columbians aren't able to go on vacation because of high gas prices. He made those claims in Vancouver today as part of his Axe the Carbon Tax campaign.
They want to hike your gas price by 61 cents a litre. No wonder 2 million Canadians are stuck at food banks every single month. 8,000 have signed on to a Facebook group called the Dumpster Diving Network, where they share tips on how to eat a meal out of a garbage can.
There are several groups on Facebook focused on dumpster diving. One called the Dumpster Diving Network of Toronto was created 7 years ago. Poilievre says the federal Conservatives want gas and diesel taxes lifted from Victoria Day coming up to Labor Day. Ocean Networks Canada says last weekend's solar storm impacted recording instruments deep in the ocean. Scientists say distortions on the instruments almost 3 kilometers below the surface were recorded. Geomagnetic flares can pose risks to power grids, satellite networks, and navigation systems. It also made the northern lights visible throughout southern BC. And you are up to date on CBC News BC. I'm Dan Bird. Thank you for joining us. Stay with us now for regular news updates. And BC Today is next with host Michelle Elliott. She's asking how evacuation orders, particularly when it comes to wildfires and other natural disasters, impact your mental health. So please tune in, listen in, and call in.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Evacuees in the Peace region are waiting and watching. Thankfully, today's cooler and wetter weather is helping with the wildfires, but fleeing your community does take a toll. We're asking, how have evacuations affected your mental health and what supports are needed? As we head into the camping season this long weekend, are you rethinking the campfire or planning to be extra vigilant? We'll speak with the Whistler Fire Chief in half an hour. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 around the province, on CBC Television, and live streaming too on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, or on YouTube at the CBC Vancouver page. And you can call us now on our top story. Have evacuation orders affected your mental health? And what are the mental health supports needed for evacuees and for firefighters? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, we're at bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, the mayor around the area of Fort Nelson says he is ecstatic since rain has begun falling in the region. But the past week has been a roller coaster of emotions for Mayor Rob Fraser and the more than 4,000 residents who have been evacuated from Fort Nelson and Fort Nelson First Nation. The Doig River First Nation has also been under evacuation order. Now, most Fort Nelson area residents have headed for Fort St. John, and here are some of them speaking yesterday to CBC News.
Volunteers here have been great. I mean, it takes a long time, so with kids and pets and uncertainty, it's a little stressful, but I mean, they've been amazing.
Luckily, after seeing the smoke, we expected it, so we had some stuff packed. Like, I know there's probably some people that, like, we didn't take a lot, but there's probably a lot of people that took less than us. It's stressful not knowing if we get to go back or not.
We have our ups and downs where we're emotional and not emotional, and we're okay and then we're not, so because we don't really know what's going on. We hear the rumor line, and the rumor line is just really long, so I've shut it all down. I don't want updates or anything except for like when we have to come renew or whatever.
Yeah, or unless it's official information.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, unless we're going to be going back to town kind
Yeah,
of thing. That's really all I care about.
It was really fast. We live out where the fire originally started, so we were evacuated to Fort Nelson. By the time we got to Fort Nelson, everything was locked up and we were told to go to Fort St. John, so we weren't allowed to go back home and get our cat or anything else, so it was really fast. It came in really fast.
And what were you able to take with you?
Baby pictures, the dogs, and an overnight bag basically, yeah.
We left everything in our backyard, in our field. We put our quads, everything that we could do.
Away from any trees
Just
and
left
stuff,
it all
yeah.
sitting there to burn, basically.
Very stressful, a lot of the unknown, and just not knowing what's going to happen next has not been a very nice feeling since we got here, but we have our family and our friends and our animals, so it's what matters. Our community comes together pretty well in a time of crisis.
It's the scariest thing ever. We weren't given a lot of time, and if you're not prepared ahead of time, you panic and you go in circles and you grab what you think you need, and it's not always what you wish you had when you got here. So be prepared, pack up, get ready, because it's going to be a wildfire season everywhere. It's dry. It's scary for everybody.
You can really hear that they are worried and weary. And we're asking you, how have evacuation orders in BC impacted your mental health? And what mental health supports are needed by evacuees, as well as by firefighters themselves? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. And if you do need mental help, you can call the province's mental health support line, and that's 310-6789. Now, the province has deployed what's called a disaster psychosocial support team to the Peace region. And David Hutton is the director of the Provincial Psychosocial Services. Good afternoon, David. Thanks for joining us.
And thank you for having me, of course.
Boy, what goes through your mind listening to what people were saying there in Fort St. John?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, it's really typical, I think, of how people respond, keeping in mind that it's so early in the season. And, if you're going to be evacuated a number of times, it gets more difficult. But, being prepared is so important, and people mention that. But it's difficult to be totally prepared. It's difficult to know what to expect. And of course, it's stressful. But, behind those voices, you also hear incredible strength, right? And you hear people saying and implying that they'll get through it, and recognizing the work and the support that they're getting provided. But That's one of the main takeaways that I think it's so important, is recognizing that people are incredibly strong, incredibly resilient. It doesn't mean that people don't suffer. It doesn't mean that people don't experience pain and sleepless nights and difficulties. But one of those key takeaways is the incredible strength of people, and how can we support them during those difficult times so they can get through that and get back home and get on with their lives.
Yeah. And your team, when the disaster psychosocial support team is deployed, what are the supports that you offer?
Yeah, we usually deploy through reception centers, and reception centers are managed by emergency support services. And those are the services that provide housing, financial support, help people address their immediate basic needs, which are so important. And, if people can get those needs met, most of them will be fine. Of course, as you heard, it's not an easy time. So our team supports people in the moment. We usually deploy to reception centers, and we provide what is basically psychological first aid. I'll explain that a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
One is just being there and comforting people, and reassuring what people are going through is normal. And of course, being evacuated, we experience different emotions. We may not be able to sleep at night. Our kids may be having some difficulties, and all of that is totally normal. And knowing what one is experiencing is normal can relieve one's distress and feelings of stress around feeling a different way. Sometimes when we're under stress and feeling overwhelmed, it helps to have somebody problem solve with us and look at different options, so we can help with that as well.
Like a roadmap or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. People going into a community that they're not familiar with. If we don't have the information, we'll try to get that information for them. And also, as I mentioned, some basic information about how people can take care of themselves and their families and others. And if they are really experiencing difficulties, we can also facilitate a referral to other services. And again, maybe that's to more formal services like counseling. We don't do counseling, but that can be beneficial to some people. Or maybe it's linkages to, housing resources or other more practical resources that they might need. Although emergency support services or ESS does a very good job at that.
Okay, so the people who are part of this team are not counselors.
Well, they all come from professional backgrounds, so they may be counselors. They may be psychologists. They may be psychologists as well. But the type of support that we provide is really in the moment. So if somebody's having difficulties, helping them solve those immediate difficulties, providing that basic information, we'll provide follow-up support, of course. But in terms of providing that typical counseling that you think of multiple sessions,
right?
We don't do that. And that's because we only see them for a short period of time. So we want to help them with that. If they do need those additional supports, then we'll link them with those supports.
That first aid is what you do, as you say.
Psychological first aid. Yeah.
Psychological first aid. My guest is David Hutton, who's director of the Provincial Psychosocial Services, and that is with the Health Emergency Management BC. So they have a team that's being deployed to reception centers where evacuees do arrive. So we're asking you, how have evacuation orders in BC impacted your own mental health, and what are the supports that are needed by evacuees as well? We'd love to know, if you're a firefighter or know someone who's a firefighter, what are the mental health supports needed by wildfire crews? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, we are at bctoday@cbc.ca. And David, I just want to go through what it is exactly that a person experiences and feels. I was struck by someone saying there, we were able to bring just baby pictures and the dogs, and we left our things out in the backyard, just sitting there to burn. And it sounded just so, I could hear grief there. I'm not a counselor, but how much is grief a part of that? Because you just don't know what you're going to lose.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the individual and depends on their unique experiences. I I think as we see the seasons go on as well, and people are being evacuated year in and year out, there is likely to be people are more prepared, but it's also more anxiety around that. And, your community escapes fire one year, what happens next year? So I think everybody is living with that uncertainty and the knowledge that we're seeing a different climate and an impact upon wildfires in terms of scope and magnitude. Again, I think everybody we can expect when they're evacuated is to experience some sort of stress. Summers used to be a time where we had families and children could go out and plan trips, and now you're planning evacuation. So that in itself is a disruption of life. And when you're evacuated, there's going to be, depending on how prepared you are in your own circumstances, that's going to affect in terms of where are you going, question marks about where are you going, question marks around when are you going home, question marks about will I have a home to go to? And people vary in how they deal with that. But I think, if you look at, the worries and the anxieties, the fears, I think those are all very common. And that's going to affect how people sleep. It's going to affect their appetite. It's going to affect their mood. Some people may be more affected than others. If you're dealing with a difficult life situation like a divorce or separation, that just adds on to the stress. If you're an elderly person, losing some of your supports can be particularly difficult. Although we have to remember that, elderly people can cope extremely well and bring a lot of wisdom. So I think it really depends on the individual, depends on their circumstance. But I think it's also really important to recognize that while people are incredibly strong, just being away from your home and being disrupted and all that uncertainty is going to affect you one way or another, both emotionally and physically. And the longer it goes on, you can expect people to get worn down by their circumstances and not being in a familiar place and being able to carry on those important family activities that people have.
My guest is David Hutton, who's Director of Provincial Psychosocial Services, and that's with the Health Emergency Management BC, dealing with wildfire evacuees, and we're talking about the mental health supports that they need. And so we're asking you if you'd like to share, how does wildfire evacuation affect mental health, and what are the supports that evacuees need? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Rob is calling us from Vernon. Hi, Rob.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for calling.
Okay, no problem. My opinion was, I was a professional firefighter for 30 years, and I was deployed to some of the, there was that mudslide up in Castle and stuff like that. And when you come back from your daily routine of being out there in the field, we don't need to have people come up and ask us all kinds of questions about what did you see, how did you feel, what was going on, can you tell us about this, can you tell us about that? Because we don't want to relive the whole day even though your intentions are sincere and honest. We just need to know what was the score in the Canucks game, what did I miss? We don't need to talk about what we did and saw all day.
Back to normalcy.
Yeah.
If you can. Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point. Is that what you found, that people were just very curious or wanting to help somehow?
So one of the ones I talk about is up in Caslo. There was that mudslide, and we would go out in the field, helicopter in, helicopter back home. We need to sit down, take our boots off, have some dinner, talk to friends. Instead of there's always people coming up and saying, what was it like up there? What did you see? Or, interviews with media and all that kind of stuff. But we just wanted to be with ourselves, decompress ourselves, and just carry on and get ready for the next day.
So if I were to ask you, what helped you, that would be it, having that that separation and that time to recover?
During the time of the event, and then of course afterwards, when we would after Castle, we would fly back to Vancouver, and then we were we had people waiting for us, and professional psychologists and all that stuff that wanted to know how our mental health was, which is a different scenario than the day-to-day grind of being out there and doing the actual job. So just separation, leave us alone, let us get rested, let us get our bodies fueled up and ready for the next day.
Yeah, what a really great point, Rob. Thanks so much for the call.
Okay, you're welcome.
You take care. Wow. Yes, and I really take his point as well about, media inquiries and interviews. I know that that's something that we keep in mind in terms of being trauma informed in our approach and not overwhelming people with media inquiries, which I know they often are. And in terms of the questions that we do ask. David Hutton, what did you take from that? It seems very, very reasonable to me.
Well, Rob makes a great point. And, really most people don't need PFA or other types of supports. And lots of people would prefer not to have it. So, part of PFA is recognizing, one, is that most people don't want it, and giving space for people to make their own decisions, not pressuring people to tell their story, knowing that we're available if they want to speak, and providing some information in a really non-intrusive way, even by offering water or pamphlets, but really recognizing that people can make their own decisions, and we're there to provide support. But certainly we're not going to intrude. And as Rob was saying, is lots of people have their own ways of coping, and that works really well for them. And I think that's, as I started off the segment talking about the incredible strength of people, that's what we recognize. But we also want to be there for those people who do want a bit of help or want to speak to us, recognizing that we're not going to pressure people into speaking to us or accessing other services if that's not what is for them.
Is there anything that makes things easier for evacuees? What can make things easier for them?
I think what people talked about at the beginning, those people who've been evacuated, one is if you're able to prepare. And again, that's easier said than done. But knowing what to expect in the summer, knowing where to get information, having something pre-packed that you can take. If you have a family, having some small toys, what do your kids really like? So being prepared, I think, is really helpful. And there's lots of information around that, especially around emergency management and climate readiness, but other authorities as well have that information. I think making sure that you get the assistance that you need. So, if you have a place to stay and you can where the restaurants are, basic needs are so important. And I think if you can sort of think about, I'm being evacuated, what can I expect? And again, that's easier said than done. But keeping some sense of continuity. When I do deployments, I always read, right? So if I ever deploy, I try to keep certain things in place. And I think that sense of continuity in one's life is helpful. And then recognizing that you may not be able to sleep, you may not feel hungry, you may be on edge, recognizing that that's okay and it's an expected response. I think that's also helpful. And it can just create that awareness that maybe I need to step back, maybe I need to, try to get that extra sleep if I can, because I know it's easier said than done. So again, being prepared, knowing where emergency social support services, other services are available to address basic needs, knowing how you can support oneself and your children. And if you need to reach out and talk to somebody, recognizing that that's okay, right? Many of us reach out. We don't always reach out to a counselor. We reach out to friends, or how Rob said, he reaches out to colleagues. Reaching out, and more chances than not, you'll find out that others are feeling exactly the same way that you're feeling during that time.
It's interesting that you've mentioned sleep probably 3 times now. Is that something you've seen that an impact on sleep?
I think it's one of those more common responses that people have. But again, other common responses are, loss of appetite or change in appetite, feeling tense or worried, feeling out of sorts, a little bit moody. You're not going to feel really as happy as you usually feel or as calm as you usually feel. Maybe more difficult to motivate oneself. So I don't want to say any one response is more usual than another, because we're all very different. And some people go through difficult experiences with minimal changes. Some people have more marked changes, and both are equally normal.
Yeah. It's, I'm sure, very validating for people to hear you speak. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you very much as well. Thank you.
David Hutton is Director of Provincial Psychosocial Services. That's at the Health Emergency Management, BC. 12:27 now. This is BC Today. The emotional demands of the wildfire season, as we've heard, can take a toll on frontline crews too. And the CBC's Shelley Joyce reports.
My experience in my first few years was really incredible.
Alex Lane started fighting wildfires in 2015. The camaraderie, the adrenaline, the necessity of the job was intoxicating to her. She loved it. 4 years later, the fires were not as threatening, and the downtime didn't come as a relief to Alex. In fact, it had the opposite effect.
Things slowed down in 2019, and that's when I found things got a little bit more challenging in terms of my mental health. So when there was that time to kind of reflect and that time to catch up, I found that very hard.
At first, Alex thought that her experiences were unique and they made her feel weak and fragile. Eventually, she discovered that other firefighters were going through the same experience as well.
Fire seasons are getting longer, and the recovery time for people is getting shorter in between seasons.
Anna Richards fought fires for 20 years. Today, she's a clinical counselor.
On the whole, people who are drawn to this work are people who, carry the burden. They are people who care a great deal about doing a good job.
Alex Lane no longer works on the front lines. She's now working on her master's degree, focused on mental health and firefighters. And she sees a big change in how new recruits are mentally prepared.
I don't have to take this on alone, and I'm not alone in this. And there's also been a change organizationally in the culture and the attitude towards mental health. 10 years ago, it wasn't something that was talked about as much.
Shelley Joyce, CBC News, Kamloops.
This is BC Today here on CBC. We're on Radio 1, live broadcasting to you, as well live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC. You can also find us on YouTube. Just search for the CBC Vancouver page. And we are, of course, broadcasting on CBC television as well. And coming up in our next half hour, we are going to talk about heading into the long weekend, which is often the launch of summer camping season. But this is all happening, as we heard, summer is changing. We are getting more concerns about wildfires. So is that changing your camping plans at all, specifically when it comes to campfires? You can let us know. That's coming up in our next half hour. Right now, here's a CBC News update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. There is a little bit of rain today, but there's no word when thousands of people forced from their homes in Fort Nelson will be allowed to return. The wildfire threatening the community continues to grow and now covers nearly 130 square kilometers. The BC Wildfire Service says the light rain isn't enough to offset the prolonged drought that is helping the fire burn in the area. Researchers with the European Union's space program say BC's wildfires have already emitted a record amount of carbon for the month of May. A statement from the service says around 15 megatons of carbon has come from Canadian wildfires this month, with BC fires accounting for more than 12. The organization says wildfire emissions in the province for May are already twice as high as the previous record set last year. And homicide investigators are at a home in Surrey's Newton neighborhood after two men were found dead inside last night. Police were called to the home along 151st Street before 9:30. Investigators say the two men were known to each other and police are not looking for any other suspects at this time. And now the forecast on the north coast, cloudy and a bit windy this afternoon with a high of 9. Highs reaching 11 with showers and a risk of thunderstorms in the Peace. In the central interior, a high of 11 with showers and a chance of thunderstorms as well. Highs in the low 20s with a chance of showers in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 20. And a chance of showers in Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley this afternoon. A bit of sunshine in Greater Victoria with highs around 18. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
The countdown is on to the long weekend.
Yes, it is.
Are you looking forward to it?
Sure. I'm actually going up to the Okanagan to Oliver because it's my sister's birthday.
Oh, how
Happy
nice.
birthday, Jill.
Yeah, there. Oh, wow. She gets a shout out too
Sure.
and everything.
Why not? It's a big one.
Yeah, wine country. That'll be lovely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to go for a hike somewhere.
Nice.
That's it. Yeah, and enjoy some time off. You have a great trip.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's Rob Zimmerman. Happy birthday, Jill. Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And a lot more of your top news coming up on CBC Radio throughout the day. Here's what's coming up on the Coast.
Michelle, hi there. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I hope you can join us for On the Coast this afternoon. Our Soapbox social panel, Mo Amir and Kyla Lee, are going to be here, and they're going to weigh in on the current state of BC politics. All the talk this week about whether BC United and the BC Conservatives are looking at changing strategy, maybe even working together against the NDP before the upcoming election. And I'll bet our panelists are going to have something to say about the Canucks and Oilers in Game 5, too. Also, our guide to personal finance, Mark Ting, will be here. He says, interest rates are high, but it's not people carrying large mortgages who are most affected. It's actually renters. So Mark is going to explain for us this afternoon between 3 and 6 for On the Coast.
Thank you, Gloria. That's Gloria Makarenko, host of On the Coast, coming up this afternoon. And yes, they'll be talking about that potential, proposed, whispered about merger between the BC United and BC Conservative parties. Our callers had a lot to say about that yesterday, for sure. I'm sure that will be an interesting and lively chat, too. Thank you very much, Gloria. Yes, we are heading into the Victoria Day long weekend. Now, it's often hailed as the unofficial start to summer and camping season. But yes, with the early start to the wildfire season, the province is reminding you to be fire smart and to stay safe. Despite the concerns, though, there is no provincial campfire ban heading into the long weekend. Category 2 and 3 open burning will be banned in most of the province, except for parts of the Northwest Fire Centre, where restrictions are in place, and the Southeast Fire Centre, where there are no bans or restrictions on fires right now. The BC Wildfire Service is warning you to be responsible and to alert officials of any suspicious burns. Now, there is a different story in Whistler where the municipality actually has brought in its own campfire ban in public areas and parks. We'll hear from the fire chief in just a moment. And we're asking you, have wildfires impacted your camping plans this summer? What will be your own approach to campfires? Do you need to have them, and do you plan to be vigilant, or do you have alternatives in mind? And if you live in a region with a campground or two, what do you want campers coming to your community to know? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or pound 690 on your cell phone. If you'd like to email us, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me now is Thomas Doherty, the Whistler Fire Chief. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Can you let us know why Whistler has taken the step of enacting a local campfire ban?
Yeah, absolutely. So just looking at the conditions, through coming into the wildfire season, obviously we're a lot drier this year. Soapback levels are much lower than they have been in the past, though we've seen a little bit of recovery recently. But those conditions, coupled with, we've had a number of illegal campfires over the past few weekends here as well. They're concerning. And then, of course, a local fire just north of us here that took off quite rapidly and spread to over 100 hectares. So when we look at all those incidents in itself and the conditions, we thought it was appropriate to not take any chances for Whistler and oppose the campfire ban, which went into place on Monday at noon.
What's been the reaction from residents?
Actually, the reaction's been quite good and very supportive from the community, and we're grateful that the community's been cooperating. A lot of the community members, not just leading up to fire season, but even over the winter season, we're taking on some of the Fire Smart projects in preparation for wildfire season to better protect their homes. So it's been good and well received, and some positive feedback from many throughout the community that I think the expectations of the fire bans were ready to be received.
Are you surprised then that there is no provincial campfire ban?
Not necessarily. I know the province looks at their areas as regions, so we're in the coastal fire region, and conditions can be varied throughout the coastal region. So we take a look at our own conditions locally here, and in the risks that we associated with that, with the uniqueness of Whistler and the steep terrains, the mountains are intermixed with our housing and whatnot within the forest. So all those things together.
And having one major road in and out.
Absolutely, yeah.
How does that complicate things for evacuation plans?
It certainly does. It depends. A lot depends on time of day, obviously, and we see quite an influx of population here. We have a base population of just under 15,000. However, over the year, our average is about 42,000 people in Whistler. And then on peak days, that could be 60, 70,000, upwards of 80,000 people. So when you need to evacuate in a short time frame, that's very challenging with the road network out of here. And there was a study done a few years back that looked at an evacuation of Whistler, and would take upwards of 15 hours to evacuate all those folks.
Oh my goodness. How do you plan for that? We've been and I ask you because we've been discussing that a little bit on the program over recent days, suggestions for other modes of evacuation. How do you plan for something like that? I mean, 15 hours.
Yeah, it's quite an undertaking, and it really involves everybody, not just the resort municipality Whistler, but the provincial government, the federal government, First Nation partners that are also in our area, and emergency program. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes with regards to our planning and our preparedness throughout the community. We recently completed our wildfire defense plan that provided a lot of really good tools for our responders out in the field to have readily available information with our critical infrastructure locations and water supplies, and our road network, the areas that have one way in and one way out, and that sort of thing. So, and I know our emergency programs have been working hard with the local hotel and industry as well, to better prepare them and making sure that residents that are coming into Whistler are aware of what's happening around. And we really encourage them to sign up for Whistler Alerts, which is available on our website at whistler.ca. And that'll ensure that if an event does occur, they'll get that information as soon as possible, which will help in that evacuation process.
I know that last month you did put together this wildfire drill as well. I saw some footage of that with residents sort of practicing, where they would go and, going to the muster station and all of that. What did you learn? What do I imagine residents of Whistler are, as you said, very aware of being fire smart. What does that mean for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I could say that the permanent residents here are very aware. Where the challenge is when we have a lot of tourists come in from other areas of the country and the world that may not be experiencing the same similar situations. So that's a little bit of a challenge for us, for sure. And sorry, what was the question again there?
Oh, I guess what it means for residents to be fire smart. You said they're very fire smart. What do they do to their homes?
Oh, absolutely. So we have a very robust Fire Smart program here in Whistler. Our Fire Smart team provides free home assessments. So they'll go out to the neighborhoods on request and work with the homeowners on what they need to do for Fire Smart and assist them in some of those mitigation projects. We have a chipping program as well to assist them with all the debris that they may clean up from their properties. We'll go out and chip that material And we also have a bin program as well where we haul that materials away. So very successful program. We've done a lot of work with strata corporations as well when they're doing fire smarting for the larger properties as well. So again, it's something that I think we're very proud of in Whistler, but there's a lot of work to be done. And we can't do it alone. We need the input from all the residents to chip in and do their part.
My guest is Thomas Doherty, the fire chief in the resort municipality of Whistler. They have enacted a local campfire ban that was in effect as of this past Monday. And there is no campfire ban around the province, but we'd like to hear from you. If you live in Whistler, let us know. What do you want visitors to know as we head into a long weekend? And for yourself, if you have plans to go camping, how have wildfires, influenced your approach to camping and campfires? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, we are bctoday@cbc.ca. And Chief Doherty, before I let you go, what should visitors to Whistler know this coming weekend then?
Whether you're coming to Whistler or if you're choosing other locations throughout beautiful BC, just be vigilant. And if you happen to be in an area where they do allow campfires, make sure you keep your campfire at a size that is in accordance with the local jurisdiction. Always have a available water supply by as well. Make sure there's no combustible materials around that campfire. And when you're done your campfire, just make sure that it is completely extinguished. It's an important piece. So we see a lot of human-caused fires from campfires that aren't fully extinguished. And if the winds pick up, they can extend out. So,
has your job changed over the years?
Absolutely. Certainly has changed over the years. A lot more emphasis on preparing our members to be trained to fight wildfires and also do structure protection as associated with wildfire. The equipment's changing rapidly. The need to have the right equipment, the amount of equipment is extremely important. As our communities grow, our ability to reach some of these areas quickly can be a challenge sometimes, especially with traffic and the road networks and that sort of thing. So there's a lot happening, and it's happening really quick. So we need to continue to work to leverage the opportunities and do everything we can to protect our communities from the climate change that's already here. It's not on its way. It's among us, and we need to adapt to that.
Well, all the best to you in your work, and stay safe this weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thomas Doherty is the Whistler Fire Chief. And again, they've enacted a local campfire ban. We are asking you, have wildfires impacted or influenced your own camping plans this summer? What will be your own approach to campfires? And what do you want visitors coming to your community to camp? What do you want them to know? We'd love to hear from you on the open line. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email to bctoday@cbc.ca. And Teresa wrote us, can we please stop all campfires? There was the following notice below from Emergency Management on May 13th, which indicates that there can be permitted campfires. Why take chances? Last year, a campfire on the shore was carefully extinguished, but the next day, there was a lot of smoke. Apparently, the campfire had seeped down into the ground, and by the next day, it had surfaced again. So the fire department had to come and extinguish it. Thank you for covering this important issue. Thank you so much for that email. And Linda wrote us as well. Each year we are facing drought conditions and the higher risk of wildfires, and I'm concerned that we still act as though nothing has changed. And the BC Wildfire Service allows campfires at all. It seems that the province waits until it is too late and there are human-caused forest fires to indicate that a ban is needed. I believe that we need to wake up to current conditions and have a permanent ban on forest fires, or she probably means campfires, until there are no longer drought conditions, which may never occur again, but so be it. We seem to regard having campfires as a right. When I've contacted BC BC Wildfire Service in previous years, the response has been the percentage of human-caused fires is small. I don't think the percentage is acceptable. Most rural communities are interfaced with forests. Linda, thank you very much for your call as well, or your email rather. It's bctoday@cbc.ca. We have another caller from Vernon right now, and Bob is on the line. Hi, Bob.
Hi there.
Hi, thanks for calling. And you wanted to comment on being in a community with, again, very little road access.
That's correct. We're in a community called Cousins Bay on Kellenelka Lake. We're a remote community. We're off grid. There's approximately 100 properties that are out there, mostly seasonal. Unfortunately, when the properties do get occupied, it is in the fire season. Summer is our happy time up there.
Sure.
We've got Cousins Bay Road that traverses through Kellenelka Lake Provincial Park. And I've been asking MOTI and the parks people
Transportation?
to clean up. Say again?
Pardon me, that was transportation and infrastructure?
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
Sorry, yes.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, Ministry of Highways back in the day. And anyways, we've got several dead danger trees that line that road. And as a matter of fact, one came down last night and someone cleared it off. But we've got high winds up here right now with the change of weather.
Yeah.
And, we've had several issues on our road over the years, over the past, since the community was homesteaded way back when. But, and this is just another roadblock of doing nothing. It's, they're promising to get their tree surveyors out there, but it's been two long months. With ample time, and it's been brought up before, actually, these danger trees, they've been dead for some time. And
I have heard of that, that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's not just our community. It's not just our community, but it's all the park users as well. That park is so heavily used now. Once it becomes a public park, it's promoted and populated by guests around the world. And so, it's just really, really frustrating that they won't make it a safe passage for us. I heard the fire chief in Whistler, very well spoken, lots of great community effort there. And, obviously a thankful community with such a great leader, who knows what's going on and doing all the proactive things. And that's all we're trying to do in our communities is one way in and one way out. That's all we have is one road. And it's just getting them to do some proactive, safe, work. It's unbelievable. There's
Bob,
nothing happening.
Yeah. What would you like, if there are people heading out there this weekend or throughout the summer, what do you think they should know then?
Well, just let them, be aware of dead, danger trees that are overhead, especially in a wind event like we're having right now. Any time of change of weather, you're going to get a tree that is weak and can come down at any moment. And with all the noise whipping around, it's really hard to hear a tree coming down with a large wind event like we have right now. So, just be aware. But at the same time, ask the parks people, ask the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to, do their job, get it done. Because this has been something that we've been asking for, albeit it's been at least 5 to 7 years that, to make them aware. And I know they are aware, but it's just been recently that I've started doing a big, long email train, to everyone who I feel that is responsible for it and who care about it. or should care about it.
Bob, I hear your advocacy there. It's something that we'll look further into, okay? Thanks so much for letting us know about it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care. That's Bob joining us from Vernon. And again, there will be, higher than average traffic volumes over the weekend. And so the BC government is advising you to plan ahead and be fire smart, saying allow additional time to get to your destination and make sure your vehicle is ready for the drive. Know before you go, so check the weather forecasts as you will be traveling in conditions that change quickly. Again, saying you should plan ahead. And before you light a fire of any size, check with your local jurisdiction, whether it's a municipality or First Nation, as they may have their own restrictions in place. That's coming from the BC government. Well, more now on the supports for evacuees from Fort Nelson. Jim Lequire is a councillor in Fort St. John, and earlier this hour, he spoke to CBC about that city's evacuation response. And here he is speaking to the CBC's Andrew Nichols.
Favorable weather conditions have been able to help the fight against the wildfire in Fort Nelson, but the evacuation order continues. Are you concerned about being able to have enough homes for everybody over a longer period, or?
Yeah, so Andrew, that's a good question. Like I said earlier, we've processed about 3,000 evacuees, and the first time we processed them, Andrew, was for 3 days. And, most of them got hotel rooms or stayed in camps or in RV parks. And now that the 3 days have passed, yesterday we processed, at least another 1,300. And they're good now until May the 21st. And, they've all got accommodations.
What kind of work is that? It must really be tough making sure that there's a roof over everyone's head to just, make sure everyone has got a place to sleep.
Yeah, well, over the years, Andrew, the city of Fort St. John, we're very charitable, not only with our time, but with our money as well. And our corporate sponsors have been absolutely fantastic, stepping up. With, say, supplying dog food, and soup and sandwiches and various toiletries. And so the communities come together and just help out the evacuees the best that they can.
And we've been asking you, what is your approach to campfires, given concerns around wildfires, of course, and an early start to the wildfire season in BC. Ron is calling us from Sunshine Coast. Hi, Ron.
Good afternoon.
Yes, what are your thoughts on camping as we head into the long weekend?
Well, I think us Canadians have this tradition of campfires while we're, at the beach or at a campsite. And I think the storyline around that tradition needs to change. Things have changed dramatically in our environment, and no longer is it make any sense to have campfires. You can have a propane fire, that's fine with me, but I've done a lot of alpine hiking as well, and people, there's hardly any wood in the alpine, and yet people, camping has to have a campfire. If you don't have a fire, you're not camping. I think that storyline needs to change, and I think that the tourism British Columbia or Canadian tourism could change that. They're still posting pictures of people sitting around campfires in these wonderful wilderness settings. That is no longer appropriate.
Really interesting to hear from you, Ron. Thank you so much. And so you're saying, other options. It doesn't have to be that traditional campfire. It can be the propane fire.
It could be a candle, Michelle. It's like the reason we're gathering around is not the fire. It's the connection with people.
How do you think people would react, Ron?
Well, I know they react because I make comments all the time to people, particularly in the alpine situation. I said, you're burning wood that took like thousands of years to be here for your one night enjoyment, and it just does not make sense.
Boy, it's really good to hear from you, Ron. Thanks so much for the call.
Thanks for hosting this.
That's Ron calling us from the Sunshine Coast. And we have a couple of emails here as well. Jason writes, just would like to know what they mean when they say human-caused fire. How many are caused by smokers compared to campfires? If campfires are going to be banned, ban smoking too. I hope you're able to pass along the input from the public you receive. And Jason says, yes, put a province-wide ban on campfires. And what we do know, this is what we've heard from Emergency Management BC Minister Bowen Ma, saying that when they say human cause, it can be various things. It's not necessarily campfire or smoking. With the Parker Lake wildfire, for example, what they said is it was caused by a tree falling, but that is considered human caused. Anything that isn't lightning strike caused is categorized as human caused. But that's a very interesting point, Jason. And Bonnie wrote us as well. I live on the True North Island, well north of Campbell River. We are relatively isolated and have seen a great increase in people coming up here to camp. Lucky them, they can camp and then can go back home. Yet they cannot have a true sense of caring as to what happens to our, quote, backyards for those of us who live here. We know better. We must do better. It is a dry year again. Why does the government play Russian roulette with our lifestyles? A forest fire near our towns is 100% avoidable and would be devastating. It makes me wonder what the government's priorities are. Thanks so much for your emails. bctoday@cbc.ca is our email address. You can let us know what you think and of what you hear on the program. Any of your thoughts, we'll take them. bctoday@cbc.ca. And we are taking your emails now as well. On tomorrow's show, we are going to talk about staying active, whatever that means to you. What is it that motivates you? My colleague, Alan Regan, who is our show director here, will tell us his personal story of what motivates him. We want to hear from you. What keeps you active? What motivates you? BC Today at cbc.ca.